The treaty room smelled like ozone and desperation. Ambassador Chen had been negotiating for 72 hours straight, and the dark circles under her eyes told everyone present that she was running on nothing but caffeine and fear. Across the obsidian table, the Velanthi delegation sat in rigid silence, their navy blue skin almost black under the harsh diplomatic lighting. I shouldn't have been there. I was just a cultural attaché, barely 3 months into my posting on the neutral station of Meridian 7. But when the Velanthi High Commander demanded a human witness of inconsequential rank to observe the proceedings, Ambassador Chen had looked directly at me. "Lieutenant Marcus Webb," she'd said, "you'll do." That was how I found myself watching humanity's last chance at peace crumble in real time. "Your terms are unacceptable," High Commander Vorath declared, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. "The humans have insulted our sovereignty, violated our borders, and now you offer us trade agreements. We came here expecting justice." "The border incursion was a navigation error," Chen replied, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "We've provided all the data, all the evidence. 300 lives were lost on both sides because of a malfunctioning guidance system." 300 Velanthi warriors, Vorath corrected. "Their blood demands more than excuses." I watched the princess throughout this exchange. Princess Kalith sat to her father's right, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. She was striking in a way that transcended species, tall and elegant, with that distinctive navy blue skin that seemed to shimmer faintly in the light. Her hair was a startling contrast. Pale blonde, almost silver, pulled back in an elaborate arrangement of braids that denoted her royal status. Her eyes were large and luminous, a shade of violet that seemed to shift toward blue when she turned her head. She caught me looking. I quickly dropped my gaze, heat rising to my face. "Then what would satisfy Velanthi honor?" Chen asked, and I heard the weariness in her voice, the resignation of someone who had already offered everything she had. Vorath leaned back. "Nothing you can give." The silence that followed felt like a funeral. I thought about my family back on Earth, about my sister's new baby that I'd only seen in hollows. I thought about how this war, when it resumed, would consume everything. "Father!" Everyone turned. Princess Kalith had risen from her seat, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "There is one thing the humans could offer," she continued. "Something that would bind our peoples together in a way that politics cannot." Vorath's expression shifted to something between surprise and suspicion. "Explain, daughter." "A marriage alliance." Kalith's gaze swept the room and landed on me. I felt my stomach drop. "Between myself and a human of common birth, it would demonstrate that humanity values our culture enough to entrust one of their own to our traditions. It would create a permanent bridge between our peoples." "Absolutely not," Vorath growled. "I will not sell my daughter to—" "You would not be selling me, father." "I am offering myself." Kalith's chin lifted. "This is my right under the 17 Accords. A princess may choose her own path to serve the Empire." Ambassador Chen looked at me with an expression that was half apology, half calculation. "Lieutenant Webb, would you be willing to participate in a ceremonial union to prevent war?" I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. I looked at the princess, at her composed face and unreadable violet eyes. Would this actually work? "It would be a political marriage," Kalith said. "A symbol. Nothing more would be required of you than your presence and your cooperation. 300 dead on each side, millions more if the war resumed. Yes, I said, I'll do it. The wedding happened 3 days later in the great ceremonial hall of the Velanthi flagship. I stood in borrowed formal robes, surrounded by aliens who had been our enemies a week ago, and tried to remember the 17 different ritual responses I'd memorized. Calith was resplendent in flowing white, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders for the first time since I'd seen her. The ceremony was long and elaborate, filled with chanting and incense and the exchange of symbolic objects I didn't fully understand. When the officiant bound our wrists together with a cord of woven silver, her skin was cool against mine, and I felt her pulse beating steady and calm. "You're doing well," she murmured during one of the ceremonial pauses. "Better than I expected from a human of inconsequential rank." "I've been practicing," I whispered back. "Your language is beautiful but complicated." Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, maybe, or amusement. "You learned Velanthi?" "Just the basics, and the wedding vows." She studied me for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable sensation of being evaluated and found unexpectedly interesting. The ceremony concluded with a ritual exchange of breath, not quite a kiss, but close enough to make my heart hammer. Then we were married, at least in the eyes of the Velanthi Empire, and the war was officially over. I expected to go home after that. I expected the marriage to remain what it was supposed to be, a political fiction, a symbol, a piece of paper that meant nothing beyond the peace it had purchased. Instead, I found myself on a ship to Velanthos Prime, the alien homeworld, with a wife I barely knew and a future I couldn't begin to imagine. "The alliance requires your presence," Ambassador Chen had explained, looking genuinely apologetic. "At least for the first year. After that, we can negotiate terms for your return." A year. A year of playing husband to an alien princess on a world where I knew no one, understood little, and would be watched constantly for signs of human duplicity. The quarters they gave us were larger than my entire apartment back on Earth. Calith and I stood in the center of the main room, surrounded by unfamiliar furniture and the soft glow of bioluminescent lighting, and faced the reality of our situation. "There's a second bedroom through that door," Calith said, her voice carefully neutral. "You'll have your privacy. I don't expect anything from you beyond public appearances and basic courtesy." Thank you," I hesitated. "Your Highness." "Calith. If we're to be convincing, you should use my name. Calith." It felt strange on my tongue, intimate in a way I wasn't prepared for. "I want you to know that I'll do my best. Whatever you need from me to make this work, to keep the peace, I'll try." She tilted her head, those violet eyes studying me again. Why what? Why did you agree? You could have refused. No one would have forced you." I considered the question. "Because people were dying, because more people would have died, and because—" I shrugged, feeling foolish. "Because someone had to say yes. Why did you suggest it? You're a princess. You could have had anyone, any alliance you wanted." "I suggested it because I saw you watching," she said quietly. "During the negotiations, everyone else was focused on strategy, on advantage, on what they could gain. But you were watching the door, the way a person watches when they're thinking about everyone who isn't in the room, the people who would suffer if we failed." I didn't know what to say to that. I hadn't realized I was so transparent. "I thought," Calith continued, "that a person who thinks about the absent might be someone worth trusting. Was I wrong?" "I hope not," I said honestly. "I'll try not to make you regret it." The first months were awkward as expected. We learn to navigate shared spaces and public appearances to present a united front when the court was watching while maintaining careful distance in private. I threw myself into learning Velanthi language, culture, history, etiquette. If I was going to be here, I was going to do it properly. Caliph noticed. She started leaving books in my room, texts that weren't available in the standard educational materials. History from the Velanthi perspective, poetry, philosophy. Once, a children's story that she said had been her favorite as a child. "You're trying very hard," she observed one evening when we were practicing a formal dance for an upcoming ceremony. "Most humans in your position would simply endure the year and leave." "I'm not most humans," I said. "And I'm not just enduring, I'm actually interested. Your culture is fascinating. Even the parts that must seem strange to you. Especially those parts. That's where the interesting stuff is, right? The differences, the things I never would have imagined." She was quiet for a long moment, and when I looked up, there was something different in her expression, something softer. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we should have dinner together tonight, just the two of us, not for appearances, just to talk." My heart did something unexpected in my chest. "I'd like that." Dinner became a habit, then breakfast. Then long walks through the palace gardens, where Caliph showed me plants that sang at sunset and pools that reflected not the sky but memories of those who looked into them. She told me about her childhood, about the pressure of being a princess in a warrior culture, about her dream of being a poet instead of a politician. I told her about Earth, about my sister and her baby, about the small town where I'd grown up and the stars I'd dreamed of reaching. Somewhere between the state dinners and the private conversations, between the language lessons and the shared silences, I realized that I was no longer pretending. I realized it fully on the night of the Remembrance Festival, when Caliph found me on a balcony overlooking the Crystal Gardens, watching the twin moons rise. "You've been quiet tonight," she said, coming to stand beside me. "Just thinking." I hesitated. "Our year is almost up." "Yes." Her voice was carefully neutral. "Ambassador Chen has already begun discussing the terms of your return." "Right," I swallowed. "Caliph, I need to tell you something." She turned to face me, her expression guarded. "Yes, I don't want to go." The words hung in the air between us. I saw her eyes widen slightly, her composure fracturing for just a moment. "I know this was supposed to be fake," I continued, the words tumbling out now. "A political arrangement, a symbol, but somewhere along the way it stopped being fake for me. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you left me that children's book. Maybe when you laughed at my terrible pronunciation and then spent 3 hours helping me get it right. Maybe the first time you told me about your poetry and I saw who you really are behind the princess facade. But I'm in love with you, Caliph. Really, truly, ridiculously in love with you. And I understand if you don't feel the same way, if this is still just politics for you, but I couldn't let you think I was eager to leave when leaving is the last thing I—" She kissed me. Not the ritual exchange of breath from our wedding, but a real kiss, desperate and tender and full of everything we'd both been holding back. "You impossible human," she whispered against my lips. "I've been trying to find the courage to say the same thing for months." I laughed, or maybe cried, or both. "Really?" "Really?" She pulled back just enough to look at me, her violet eyes bright with emotion. "I watched you learn my language and my culture. I watched you treat my people with respect and curiosity instead of fear. I watched you become someone I never expected, someone I never thought I could want. And I've been terrified that you would leave and I would have to pretend it didn't matter." It matters, I said. You matter more than I knew how to say. She took my hand, her cool fingers intertwining with mine. Then stay, not as a symbol or a political fiction. Stay as my husband, my real husband. I thought about Earth, about my old life, about everything I would be giving up. Then I looked at her, at this brilliant, complex, beautiful woman who had somehow become my whole world. Yes, I said, I'll stay. Our second wedding was small and private, witnessed only by those who mattered most. When the officiant bound our wrists together again, it felt different. It felt like a promise. And when Caliph leaned in for the ritual exchange of breath, she paused and smiled. This time, she whispered, let's do it the human way. So we did. What started as a desperate gambit to stop a war had become something neither of us expected. Not a symbol, not a fiction, something real. My name is Marcus Webb. I came to this world as a cultural attaché of inconsequential rank, became a fake husband to an alien princess, and somehow ended up exactly where I belonged. Some things, it turns out, are worth crossing the stars for.